Tom Pater. I'm one of the perfusionists working with Vince and Cindy, and I'm going to talk to you today just a little bit about kind of our basic ECMO setup, what all the numbers are that we look at, the lingo that we use, just so you guys are more informed when we come in here and start yelling about things about TEG and delta P and all those kind of things that may have escaped you. I know a lot of you have taken the ECMO class in the past, but I'm sure some of you have taken it in the way past. So.
And some in the way past.
And some in the way past. Yeah. So it's nice to have a refresher on just what everything is about the pump. So we're just going to go over kind of the anatomy of the pump, what all the numbers are. We'll spin the pump around. We'll kind of get onto that side. We'll go over a couple of situations, answer some questions if you guys have them, and everybody's been very excited to use the hand crank, so we'll all get a chance to use the hand crank.
I used that.
I already had that privilege.
You had that privilege of using the hand crank, yeah. So with that, we'll start with kind of what everybody sees when they walk in, when a patient's on ECMO, and that's this side of the pump. Several numbers around here. The most important one is right here. So that's our flow. That's the flow that's going to the patient. We kind of messed around with this setup so that we could have something similar to what we would see down here, roughly around 600. We kind of see that 400 to 700 range on our patients down here. So essentially that's our cardiac output that's going to the patient, at least on this side. Now obviously the patients are ejecting, so they do have some cardiac outputs and negative contribution as well. But this is just what the pump's doing. You see another number here. This is 189. This is our pre-oxygenator pressure. So that's the pressure that's pushing into the oxygenator. The oxygenator functions where the pressure is pushing the blood through it, and as it's pushing through the fibers, that's how we're getting the oxygenation. This is our newest, most state-of-the-art oxygenator. I think it's safe to say that we've replaced every other oxygenator that we have now. It's nice. It's long-term. We don't have the buckets collecting the plasma like we used to. So this oxygenator it's pretty neat in the technology that they use now. Yes, a nice big change, a nice change from what we've had in the past. If you also look up here, you'll see a bunch of little bubbles. So that's our bubble detector. That's going to shut off the pump should it engage, and we want to see green. Green means it's functioning and that there's no bubbles happening. Also on here, also important, is our RPMs. Now, RPMs aren't necessarily important because of what they are. We want to see that number stay as constant as possible. Changing the RPMs could mean several different things. It could mean that there's an obstruction in the cannula. It could mean that the kid is starting to recover. The cardiac output on the child is getting better. So if we see that starting to push back on the cannulas, we might see that have to go up to maintain the same flow. But the important thing to get from that is that we're watching that over time. So we want to see that a nice constant, plus or minus a couple hundred, but we don't want to see huge fluctuations, from, let's say this patient had 1,600 RPMs. We don't want to come in the next day and see that the patient has 2,100 RPMs. If the patient's at 1,750 or 1,500, that's just if the patient's awake or the patient's just been paralyzed, those numbers can change a little bit, but we don't want to see big changes. And with any ECMO run, we don't want to see those big changes. We want to see nice, small, getting better, hopefully over time. We have a couple other numbers over here. If you see this number and this number are identical, that's because they're measuring the same thing. This specific screen is for the centrifugal pump. And we'll get into more detail on that when I spin the pump around. But as we switch things over, we can actually see what our pressure is going into the oxygenator and what our pressure is coming out of the oxygenator. Why that's important is that's what everybody, when we come in here and yell about the delta P. The delta P is the pressure difference between the inlet of the oxygenator and the outlet of the oxygenator. That is our indication of oxygenator function. As time goes on and the oxygenator starts to fill with clot and gook and cellular debris and whatever you want to call it, the function starts to decrease. If it gets high enough, and that we have to push harder against that oxygenator to get it to function, and eventually the oxygenator will stop functioning at a certain point. So as we'll see that increase, that may be our indication to change the oxygenator. And then we have our second pressure over here, and this is our venous pressure. There's several different things that can happen. If the cannulas move, we can have a change in venous pressure. If the patient starts to diurese, we can have a change in venous pressure. If there's a piece of clot or debris that gets clogged in the cannulas, we can have changes in venous pressure. So that's something that we're always watching. We don't like to see, again, with ECMO, we don't want to see a huge change quickly. We want to see a slow change over time. Hopefully, the patients, we're getting the volume off of them, they're recovering, and we're able to get them off. But that's generally the numbers that we'll look for. Just to kind of give you a look of what delta P is. I don't know if we'll actually get a delta P change because we don't have any blood in this patient right now. But we may see a small change when I switch over to. Right now we're at pre-oxygenator pressure, and we'll change over to post-oxygenator pressure. I don't know if it dropped any, but
Yep. Mm-hmm.
it did. So this oxygenator has a delta P of 10.
What's your good parameters?
You know, it varies from patient to patient. You know, we like to see, we'll have a baseline, and it'll be anywhere between, let's say, 12 and 30, and that's completely normal. Depending on the flow, the higher the flow, normally the higher the delta P. But that's kind of generally what we look at when we go on. We'll see right around there, and then when we start to get concerned is when we see that double. So let's say we have a delta P of 25. We'll just call it, make it nice and easy. If we come in the next day and it's 35, we're not worried. If it's 40, we're not worried. If it's 50, okay, now we're starting to get a little bit concerned here. The oxygenator is still functioning well, even at that higher delta P, but we know that something's going on where we're getting some type of buildup of something, whether the oxygenator fibers are starting to get clogged or there's a piece of clot that's in there that's starting to break down. We don't know, you know, because obviously we can't look inside the oxygenator. We only get a little picture of the front of the oxygenator to see. But then if we start to see that increase again, and we go from 60 to 70, and the ECMO specialists are very good at letting us know, you know, waking us up at 3 in the morning, letting us know that it's gone higher. But if we start to see that 80, 90, then we're going to say, okay, it's doubled once, it doubled again, we're going to go ahead and change that oxygenator. Are there any questions on this side of the pump that we all see when we walk in the morning? Okay, great. Then we'll turn it around and get into the guts of the pump.
We said we were scaring them with the smell.
So I'm going to kind of follow it through from the venous side all the way through to the arterial side. This is our baby. Isn't she cute?
1,000 grams.
Yeah. Very small.
It's a good sized baby.
So generally, we'll start with our venous side. Now we'll have a venous cannula that's hooked up to the baby, or two, and we'll drain down from there. As we go down, everybody loves looking at the CDI and the beautiful numbers that it gives us all the time. Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't, but most of the time we'll have one on here. This is where our venous monitor will attach to the CDI. So that'll give us the hematocrit and the venous sat. And as we go down, we have all of the stopcocks that you guys love to attach all your drips to. You can't wait to get the baby on ECMO so you can move everything over.
Yeah.
As a perfusionist, I'll let you know that drives us absolutely crazy, but we understand.
Why?
You know,
Just
the
opening
biggest
it up,
thing, I mean,
opening
you guys
the
are very, very good at making sure that everything's de-aired and that, you know, it's done as safely as possible. But as a perfusionist, we're always scared about air getting into our circuit, especially on the venous side because it's sucking.
Going right into it.
So, you know, one loose stopcock, one, you know, disattachment at the pump, and we may be sucking air down. So that's why we're concerned about it. We always we'll always harp on that. If you ever had a perfusionist design a circuit, we wouldn't have any of these in there. But we know that there's give and take. You guys need access to the babies, so that's why we have these in here. From here, we'll kind of work on one piece at a time. So right here, that's where we're monitoring our venous pressure. Generally speaking, we'll only have that attached to here, and then we get a true venous pressure. If we have other things attached to it, or if we have shunts going into there, it's going to skew that pressure. So we'll have that sitting alone. On this side, that's the outlet of our manifold line. So that's where we're going to pull our blood gases. We're going to pull our arterial blood and venous blood gases from the pump. And if you look outside, it's just it's a triple stopcock manifold, and we can draw either way. We can pull backwards from the venous side. We can pull from the arterial side.
Can you point to that?
Yes. Right back here. All the way on the other side. You see it back there?
I don't know. Oh, okay. Got it.
So that's where we draw our gases from, and our ACTs. There we have an empty one for you guys to attach all your stuff to. And on this side, this is it's just an arterial venous shunt. So one of the things, obviously being concerned about air, one of the things we want to do is if we do have air, we want to make sure it stays back here. We don't want it to go to the baby. So we have this shunt here at the highest point of the oxygenator. Everybody knows that air rises, so that should be the best point to get air out of the circuit. So if there is air in there, hopefully, by physics, it should just keep circulating back here until we remove it. And that's one of the reasons why we have this up here. The other reason that we have it up here is that with these babies at such low flow, if you think a baby at maybe 400 mLs per minute, and this circuit is about 400 mLs, it takes a full minute for the blood to go from one side of this pump all the way to the other side of this pump. That's a long time to travel through without clotting, especially when we're going heparin-free or we have low heparin or the patient's bleeding. So we put several of these shunts in because although the baby's getting 400 of flow, the pump is getting 800 or 900 of flow because we have all of these shunts open back here that's shunting the blood around. But up here, with the baby's getting the 400. This is usually gone. This we have when we're priming. That's how we add our blood to the circuit. But that disappears, and then you guys get more lines where you can put things in. Then we're going to get to the centrifugal pump. Let me hang the baby back up. Turn this off for a second. So you can see how that goes. So the centrifugal pump, you can look there and kind of see it. Look at that, there's some air. It's a centrifugal force pump. It has several fins in there, and it's actually spinning what we had here at 1600 RPMs. That centrifugal force is pulling the blood from this side and pushing it through here. This one doesn't have any bearings in it, which means that it can last for a long time. The old pumps used to have stainless steel bearings in there, and over a couple of days, those bearings would start to heat up, the lubrication would wear down, and then the pumps would just, you hear them start to make noise, and then they would just stop. These newer pumps are bearingless, so they can get much longer term use. It's not really important, but it's important to know that once we put these on, generally speaking, we don't have to change these. They're very durable. It'll spin through the centrifugal pump. Turn it back up this way. Into our oxygen. We have a couple of stopcocks here as well. This one is just for our use. It's a way that we can remove air from the circuit. Because a lot of times the air will get held up. If you just saw when I had it in there, you saw that big slug of air. It's going to stay in there. So, it's one of the places where we can trap air, and then we can just pop that off and remove it with a syringe over here. But right from the centrifugal pump, we go into the oxygenator. It's unfortunate that we can't keep a used circuit because it's kind of stained, and you can actually see the individual fibers that the blood passes over to exchange gas. But if you look in there, you see all that white. For the ease of explaining it, it's essentially a bunch of carpet fibers that are matted down in one. I think this one is multi-directional, so there'll be carpet fibers that are matted this way, and the carpet fibers that are matted this way, and the blood passes across the outside of them. When it comes on the outside of them, the fibers have small holes that are built into them. Too small for any liquid to pass out of it, but large enough to where gas can exchange. So essentially they're like pseudo-alveoli. before we're able to exchange gas. So it'll pass through one side, and as it's pushing through, you can see how thick the oxygenator is, so you can think of how inefficient this is. It has to push through all of that to get through what a very thin lung can do on its own. Pass through, this also has a heating element in there so that we can heat or cool the patient as we need to, and that's why we have this heater cooler and our water lines hooked up there, and then we can keep the patient at 37 degrees. Or if we had an incident where we had to go on ECPR, we might keep the patient a little bit cooler to recover. From the oxygenator will come out of our arterial line. So we got deoxygenated blood going in, and we have oxygenated blood coming out. You can see here that's one of our shunts, and that's where that's going to go down to our manifold, as we saw earlier, so that we can pull our arterial blood gases and make sure that the oxygenator is functioning normally. And from there, we'll go down and we have a flow probe, and that's going to tell us what we're getting to the patient. Our bubble detector, and everybody's favorite, the automatic clamp. The pump is not occlusive, so if we do get a bubble or any issue where the pump would stop, the patient's pressure is going to push the blood backward, and that's where our remote clamp will come in. So if this detects any reverse flow, or if the bubble detector goes off, the clamp will engage. So if you probably won't be able to hear it on the iPad, but you guys will be able to hear it. Did you hear that little hiss? That was this closing off. So the bubble detector went off. Remember, the flow was at around 600, and now the flow is at 0. And the bubble is going crazy right now. So it's letting us know. You can hear that that alarm, and you can see that the flow is turned off, and it's going to stay that way until we fix the problem. Now I put it back in there and cleared the alarm, and now it'll open back up, and now we have flow again. That's important for a couple of reasons. One, when anybody's around this side of the pump, and the first time I did this, I was able to get it to engage just by nudging it, and the last time I did it, I was banging on the thing and could not get it to engage. But these bubble detectors are very sensitive, and even sometimes bumping into it can cause it to engage. And obviously this one is not so sensitive today. But on other, see right there, just pulled on that tubing a little bit and engage. Now you see there's no bubble, but it's still engaged just by that little bit of movement on the lines.